gentlemen. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I am sincerely grateful to all of those who have supported the Critical Infrastructure Protection Act. I am especially grateful to Chairman Pete Sessions for his co-sponsorship and his committed partnership on this bill, as well as, of course, to Chairman McCall and to the leadership team of this House for allowing this legislation to come to the floor. I think it's an especially appropriate time for us to pause and reflect on the tragedies that have occurred in France and to stand in solidarity with those people who are part of the free world and do their best they can to fight terrorism and to survive its effects. And my prayers are with them, and it is ironic that today we are here dealing with the legislation to try to help mitigate our own vulnerabilities to potential attacks that could come in the future. Mr. Speaker, electromagnetic pulse, or EMP, can be catalyzed by non-nuclear intentional electromagnetic interference, or a major solar storm, or a high-altitude nuclear blast. EMP is an invisible force of ionized particles with the potential to overwhelm and destroy our present electrical power grids, which are a vital component of nearly every other critical infrastructure we have. Reducing America's vulnerability to naturally occurring or weaponized electromagnetic pulse is a timely and critical matter of national security. During the past several decades, America has spent billions of dollars hardening many of our critical defense assets, including our nuclear triad and our missile defense components, against natural or weaponized electromagnetic pulse. However, the Department of Defense relies upon the largely unprotected civilian grid for 99% of its electricity needs in the continental United States, without which it cannot affect its mission. 12 years ago, in August of 2003, an electromagnetic pulse knocked out a large portion of the electric grid across the eastern United States. 50 million people were affected after 21 power plants shut down in just 3 minutes. Office workers streamed into parking lots, and many commuters were stranded inside their trains. In a matter of moments, the things that make up our critical infrastructure, from the electric grid to water pumps to cell phone service to computer systems, were disrupted. Life suddenly changed that day in New York City, in Cleveland, in Detroit, and all the way into Canada. In New York City alone, this short blackout was estimated to cost more than $500 million. There are at least 11 major government reports now that have all come essentially to the same conclusion regarding our vulnerabilities to electromagnetic pulse. Some of America's most enlightened national security experts, as well as many of our enemies or potential enemies, consider a well-executed, weaponized electromagnetic pulse against America to be a, quote, kill shot. Let me say that again, a, quote, a kill shot to America. However, our civilian grid remains fundamentally unprotected against severe EMP, and for it to remain so is an open invitation to our enemies to exploit this dangerous vulnerability. Indeed, the National Intelligence University recently translated an Iranian military doctrine called passive defense. This doctrine stresses that electrical grids are vital to the national existence of major powers in the world like America. And it includes a formula for calculating the value of electrical power plants and for prioritizing the targeting of electric grid components and other critical infrastructures. Mr. Speaker, this Iranian military doctrine referenced the use of nuclear-generated electromagnetic pulse as an effective weapon more than 20 times. Now that the Islamic Republic of Iran begins to enjoy the bounty of their nuclear negotiations, it should be a wake-up call to all of us that the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism is contemplating the concept of nuclear-generated electromagnetic pulse as an asymmetric weapon against America. Thankfully, Mr. Speaker, we are here this day to pass the Critical Infrastructure Protection Act, which, if signed into law, represents the first time in history that Congress will be specifically addressing this dangerous threat of electromagnetic pulse. This legislation will enhance the DHS threat assessments for EMP through research and reporting requirements. It will help the United States prevent and prepare for such an event by including large-scale blackouts into our critical existing national planning scenarios, including educational awareness for the first responders to protect critical infrastructure. Most importantly, it requires a specific plan for protecting and recovering the electrical grid and other critical infrastructure from a dangerous electromagnetic pulse event. Mr. Speaker, finally, there is a moment in the life of nearly every problem when it is big enough to be seen by reasonable people and still small enough to be addressed. Those of us in this chamber and across America live in a time when there still may be opportunity for a free world to address and mitigate the vulnerability that naturally occurring or weaponized EMP represents to the mechanisms of our civilization.